The funnels are often the first thing that an onlooker notices about a ship. This was especially true in the case of Titanic and her four-funneled piers of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. I find that one of the few details about Titanic that a layperson knows is that she had four funnels, and this is for good reason. Titanic's four tall funnels were meant to be seen and to impress. In an era when ocean liner travel was still quite risky, the four funnels signaled, whether warranted or not, strength and power in the great ship. How many funnels Titanic had is the kind of question you might be asked at your local pub's trivia night. But there is much more to the funnels than meets the eye. In theory, they are simple devices whose names accurately describe their fundamental function of funneling coal smoke up from the bowels of the ship and up into the air away from the ship. But in practice, the funnels are more intricate and engineered than you might expect. The funnels were technically constituted of two distinct sections, the lower funnel and what is just called the funnel. The lower funnel is, appropriately, the section of funnel which isn't visible from the outside. They extend all the way from the tops of the boiler uptakes in the depths of the ship, up to the tops of the boiler casings on the boat deck. The funnels, on the other hand, are what you probably think of when you hear the term funnel. I'm just going to call them the upper funnels for the rest of this video, for the sake of clarity. The upper funnels are everything which sits on top of the boiler casing and are visible when looking at the ship from shore or when standing out on deck. On Titanic, the forward or number 1 funnel handled the combustion gases and smoke from boiler rooms 5 and 6. The second funnel handled boiler rooms 3 and 4, and the third funnel handled boiler rooms 1 and 2. The smoke and gases from these boiler rooms were directed into the lower funnels via the boiler uptakes, which are these sort of spider-looking structures connecting each of the boilers to the funnels. Now, the lower funnels weren't the open, cavernous cylinders that you might imagine. The lower funnels were divided up into various sections called flues, like the flue in your chimney at home. Each of the first 3 funnels was divided into 2 flues, one fore and one aft. Each of these flues was dedicated to one of the 2 boiler rooms serviced by that funnel. You might wonder, why would the funnel have to be divided into separate flues for each of the boiler rooms? Isn't the smoke all going to the same place? Well, yes, it is all going to the same place. However, in order for the smoke and gases to move properly up the funnel, a healthy draft needs to be established, which requires a certain level of consistent heat. This isn't a problem if both of the boiler rooms under a given funnel are lit, but if only one of the boiler rooms is in use at the time, then the draft might become insufficient to properly carry away the smoke. This problem is solved by utilizing a flue for each boiler room. But we're only getting started with the division of the funnels. The number 1 funnel was the simplest, and was as I just described. But the middle funnels, numbers 2 and 3, were divided into even more flues. Again, you might wonder why this is if all the funnels in question service only 2 boiler rooms each. Well, the reason is that there were certain designated boilers used for powering the electric plant, pumps, ventilation fans, and other auxiliary equipment, while the other boilers were shut down, such as when the ship was in port. In order to maintain an appropriate draft when just a few of these boilers were in use, the number 2 funnel was further divided into 2 more flues, both within the forward half of the funnel. The number 3 funnel had even more flues, 5 additional flues within the after half of the funnel. The funnels were each divided up in yet another way, albeit for a different purpose. The funnels consisted of an inner and outer funnel. The inner funnel is what does all the work of carrying smoke and gases up through the ship. But these fumes can be extremely hot, about 600 degrees Fahrenheit. So an outer funnel was included in the design. Between the inner and outer funnels is empty airspace to create a buffer so as to reduce how much heat escapes the sides of the funnels. Before we move on, let's briefly talk about that 4th funnel, the so-called dummy funnel. There is some truth to the claim that the 4th funnel is a dummy, in that it didn't service any of the boiler rooms. However, it was used for ventilation and different kinds of exhaust discharge. Fumes from various kitchens, called galleys aboard ship, were discharged through the 4th funnel. It also provided ventilation to many other rooms and areas of the ship. It also served as a chimney for the only real fireplace aboard Titanic, which was in the first-class smoke room. These functions could have been performed by other means, but the fourth funnel might have been the best solution, especially since it allowed Harland and Wolff to balance the profile of Titanic and make her look so much more appealing. Seriously, Titanic would just not have looked as good as a three-funnel ship. There are many other features inside the funnel I want to talk about, but let's move outside for a few minutes. On both the forward and after ends of the funnel were the steam escape pipes. These allow Titanic to blow off steam, if you will, and you might recognize them from this very loud scene in the 1997 movie Titanic after the ship came to a stop, but still had steam pressure built up. These pipes did not go all the way to the tops of the funnels in order to reduce the opportunity for ash from the funnels to end up in the steam pipes and clog them. I'm sure you will have noticed that Titanic's funnels are angled or raked away from the bow. This choice is largely a matter of tradition and aesthetics, but also has some function in that it helps guide smoke and soot towards the stern and away from the ship and her passengers. I'm not exactly sure how effective this was, but the rake also does a lot for the ship's grace, especially since the masts were also raked. So much thought went into Titanic's outward beauty, in fact, that her builders even included fake steam supply lines to inoperable steam whistles on funnels 2 and 3, even though Titanic only used steam whistles on her first and fourth funnels. The ladders on the forward end of each funnel are primarily to provide access to the whistles and their steam supply lines. The ladders would not have been the primary way of maintaining the upper funnels themselves. Rather, work such as painting the funnels was done by men using what are called bosun's chairs. Eyes with small pulleys, called blocks aboard ship, were fixed to the funnel's stiffening band at the top of the funnel. Through these, lines were run to hoist the men up in their bosun's chairs to work on the funnels. The iconic paint that these workers would have applied to Titanic's funnels was called White Star Buff, which is a kind of golden beige. The exact shade is somewhat debated, but it probably varied slightly over the years. The tops of the funnels were painted black, so as to hide the black soot, which would quickly accumulate around the tops of the funnels. You can see what it would have looked like without the black band of paint by looking at Titanic's sister ship, Britannic, when she was serving as a World War I hospital ship with all gold funnels. When the lines used for painting were not in use, the lower ends were secured away from the funnels to the bottom ends of the funnel shrouds. The funnels needed additional support because the funnels themselves weren't actually very strong. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't have been subject to very much stress and really only needed to support themselves and the equipment that they housed. Rather than strengthening the funnels with a lot of excess and heavy metal, securing the funnels was better done with shrouds. Shrouds are the cables running from near the tops of the funnels to the deck. In Titanic's case, these were 4-inch circumference galvanized steel cables. There were 12 for each funnel, 6 to port and 6 to starboard, and they were attached to shackles at the stiffening band around the bottom edge of the funnel's black paint. On the deck, there were pad eyes with their own shackles for the shrouds to attach to. The tensions on the shrouds could be adjusted as needed, which was done on a regular basis before the boilers were lit. Remember that 600-degree Fahrenheit heat inside the funnels? Well, that heat would cause the funnels to expand and become even taller to the point where the shrouds would become too taut if they were not slackened. One thing I wondered about when I was a kid and just becoming interested in ships and Titanic was what happened when rain got into the funnels. After all, the tops of the funnels are massive 24 by 19 foot wide openings. Well, when the ship is at sea and the boilers are lit, the extreme heat of the gases rising out of the funnels was enough to vaporize or push aside any rain which might otherwise have fallen into the funnels. When in port for extended periods of time, or when there was rain, canvas covers were secured over the openings of the funnels. These were deployed manually by crew from platforms near the tops of the inside of the funnels, which were accessed via interior ladders. But what about the fourth funnel, where the extremely hot discharge from the boilers was not applicable? In this case, there were metal plates inside running partially across the funnel in 2 places. These caught the rain and redirected it to a drain and ultimately down to the deck. We've covered just about all I know about Titanic's funnels, but I want to share one last piece of trivia. Did you know that Titanic's funnels are different heights? It's true that they look the same size when looking at the ship, but that's exactly why the funnels are different heights. Titanic's designers wanted the funnel tops to look even with each other, but Titanic's boat deck had shear to it. Shear is the curvature of the deck along its length. Usually the deck is highest at the bow and the stern and lower amidships. We won't get into the reasons for this here, but it does mean that the funnels have to be different heights in order for them to be level with each other. Titanic's middle two funnels are each 74 feet above the boat deck, compared to just 70 feet in the case of the first funnel and 73 in the case of the fourth funnel. That's a lot of shear and part of what makes Titanic such a beauty. Is there anything related to funnels that I didn't cover but you want to know about? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like since it really does help the channel continue to grow. Thank you for watching. Until next time.